Hi everyone, this is Lars Ekman and next to me is Ashwin.
Hello.
And so welcome to a presentation about Yubico. So let's start from the very beginning. Next slide, please. Who is Yubico? Company was founded here in Stockholm back in 2007. And today we are grown into somewhat 200 people around the globe with offices in 8 countries. The main office, headquarters, is here in Stockholm, and also we have our production companies offices in Palo Alto and Seattle. Over years, a lot of success has happened to us with a lot of business opportunities. And for the last 7 years, we've been able to be profitable by ourselves. But saying that, we're still backed by top investors, which gives us the opportunity to really lead the market and develop into the futures. Thousands of enterprise customers actually use our products today with more than millions of users globally. And you can see at the bottom on this page a couple of the companies that are willing to share with you guys that they are Yubico users. Next slide, please. So what are we doing? We're trying to address the #1 security problem in the IT arena, and that is, of course, breaches, and stolen credentials is the main part or the main reason for that. Honestly, over 80% of all data breaches starts with a weak password, something that you can actually guess, or that you have the ability to steal the password from someone. Over 3.3 billion stolen credentials were reported in 2017. And this is, of course, at enormous cost to companies and organizations. And the problem is very easily described by this picture. So you want, of course, to be as high as possible on the security side, but you still need to combine that with ease of use. And that's been tricky. You know, we have been through passwords, all different things for a long time. The perfect solution, we believe, is YubiKey, a very strong authentication mechanism. So the YubiKey gives you ease of use. You just touch a small button to actually authenticate yourself. And with stronger security, you stop phishing attacks and man in the browser, man in the middle attacks. And Yubico, it actually comes from the word ubiquitous, which means that it fits to all systems. We are working very hard to have the best components, the best quality in every respect, and to also be compliant with all the standard. All this together actually gives our customers best total cost of ownership. One thing that people normally don't think about, but if you get rid of passwords in an organization, the help desk normally can start idling, doing other stuff. So I think almost 70 or 75% of the cases that the help desk normally handles is password resets. So by getting rid of passwords, you actually save a lot of money for the company. And by now, I give the word over to Ashwin. Here we go.
All right. Hello, guys. So thank you, Lars, for actually telling us a little bit about the problem that Yubico is trying to address. Within the next few slides and the next minutes, actually, I'm going to take you through what we do with the YubiKey. So as you can see on the screen right now, this is what technically a YubiKey looks like. So YubiKey is basically an authentication token that you can use And the YubiKey, unlike a lot of the other products are available on the market, it's actually a key which has the possibility to embark a lot of different protocols on the same device. And right now I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what are the different protocols that we have on our YubiKey. So let's start with the first one that is most liked, I would say, by our enterprise customers. It's the smart card capability of the YubiKey. So when you take a machine which is running Mac, it's detected as a smart and a smart. And the smart card specification that we use is actually a specification which has been published by the NIST in the US and which is called PIV, Personal Identity Verification. Why did we take the decision to actually adhere to that specification? Is first of all, because it's an open standard. And secondly, because it is natively integrated in the Microsoft operating system, in the Microsoft infrastructure when it comes to servers, or even for Windows 7 or 10 when it comes to like the desktops. So basically, by buying like a YubiKey, you don't really need to buy any additional software. You can use it natively with your Windows infrastructure to actually offer your users, your customers or your internal users, actually the ability to do smart card authentication without having to buy any additional software or without having to have any additional support costs or recurring costs associated. So we integrate natively with the Windows infrastructure. So literally, if in an organization you have an Active Directory services, and then you have Active Directory certificate service as a PKI, you don't need to do anything else. You just need to configure a couple of templates, and you can use smart card authentication for your users. So why this is interesting, actually, for most of our users is it's one of the ways that we can literally get rid of passwords for my internal users. Meaning that we don't have to care anymore about password complexity, changing your password very regularly, or people actually just forgetting their passwords. And I'm not even going to speak about the people who actually write the passwords on a Post-it and leave it on a desk, which is obviously a very bad move when it comes to security. So this is one of the features that we have on the YubiKey. And we have seen that a lot of our customers have been able to implement that quite rapidly, and deployments can scale up quite easily as well. So this is one of the things that we do on the YubiKey. Since we are compliant with the PIV standard, we have the possibility to load certificates and private keys on the YubiKey for 4 different kinds of scenarios. One is for authentication. So for instance, opening my Windows session. The other one is for encryption. So I have the possibility to store the key that I will use to encrypt my emails or files. I also have the key for digital signature. And on top of that, the latest series of YubiKeys, the YubiKey 5, it also has an NFC antenna. And because we have that NFC antenna, we have the possibility of keeping another kind of key, which is called the physical authentication key. So by using a YubiKey, I could potentially approach a smart card reader, which is obviously compatible with the standard, and use it to actually open doors to get inside my office. So those are the 4 parts that we cover basically within the smart card applet. On top of that, the YubiKey, as I mentioned previously, is multiple protocols at the same time. So we also have the possibility of using the YubiKey as a container for private keys when it comes to open PGP. So again, in that sense, it's depending on the use case, but you can use OpenPGP to open your session. When it comes to Linux machine, for instance, you can use it also to encrypt and decrypt emails, and also for digital signature. So the YubiKey is once more natively compatible with the OpenPGP suites. So be it running on Windows or Linux or whatever, you can still use it, right? Then we have the whole world of one-time password. So one-time passwords have been here for quite a while now. It's been almost 20 years or more, but they've been around as a second factor. While it is not necessarily the most secure way of protecting your authentication schemes, it is still in use quite widely in the market because that has been built in a lot of legacy applications. So we took the decision to also keep that protocol available in our YubiKey. So directly with the YubiKey. So when you connect it to a machine, it's detected as a USB keyboard. And literally just by touching the little contact, which looks like a golden circle on the YubiKey, you can generate a one-time password and put it directly into the field of the applications or the web application that you're trying to access, without having, for instance, to take like, you know, your keyring and then reading the digits and then writing it again. Just a simple touch on the golden circle and you're in. And this is coming back to what Lars was talking a bit about earlier, the ease of use. This is also very important because obviously if you put in security measures and your users don't want to use them, it starts to get very complicated because they will try to find ways to, like, you know, go around the measures that we put in place. And that's why it's always important to keep in mind that any security measure that we put in place, it has to be easy for the user to use, right? Then on the same key, we come to like the interesting part, which is, according to us, the future of authentication. So a few years ago, we got together with Google, who is also one of our biggest customers, and we wanted to address the problem of multi-factor authentication, but trying to get something which is resistant to man-in-the-middle attack and phishing attacks. And the one way that we actually decided together to make that happen is actually to use the same principle behind a smart card authentication. That is, instead of having a shared secret between the service and the customer or the user, we will have something for authentication which is based on key pairs. So you will have a public key and a private key, right? And this is the basis on which FIDO U2F has been created and is based on. So FIDO U2F in itself, it means Forced Identity Online for FIDO, and U2F means Universal Second Factor. So this protocol has been quite adopted. So right now I can speak, for instance, about Google, who have adopted it completely, be it for Gmail or G Suite or G Cloud. Or you have other players as well, such as Salesforce, such as GitHub, who have adopted this, the protocol as well. And also some, I would say, more personal applications. For instance, if we look at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they also have adopted the FIDO U2F protocol. The nice thing about that is that really the way that the protocol has been designed is that I can use the same YubiKey with services which are both for my professional use, but also for my personal use, in the sense that there's always different pair of keys which are generated for all services. So that was the part with FIDO U2F. Then a couple of years ago, actually, Microsoft also came to the table and were like, well, FIDO U2F is great, but what if we couldn't even make it better? And that's what we did, actually, by evolving the protocol into FIDO2. So later during the presentation, I will actually go into a couple of demonstrations of how you can use FIDO2. FIDO2 has been adopted by Microsoft in its Azure Active Directory scenario. It's already available for public preview to any customer of Azure Active Directory, but it's also available for all its, I would say, personal line of services as well, such as Hotmail, Xbox, Xbox Live, etc. Right. So all this, the beautiful thing about the YubiKey is that all those protocols, you can use it at the same time. That means that I can have one key which I can use for literally all my authentication needs, right? And this is something which we have seen on the market is quite interesting, because most of the enterprise customers these days, if you go to them, you will see that they have, you know, an OTP generator, then they have a smart card, then on top of that, they have maybe like a mobile device for receiving SMS or anything. Whereas with the YubiKey approach, we can actually say, guys, you don't need to have like all those authentication methods. Just use the YubiKey, and the one key is actually enough for you to go everywhere you need. Right. So the beautiful thing about having all those, I would say, protocols embedded inside the same token, the same YubiKey, is that we have the possibility of having almost out-of-the-box integrations with a lot of the IT vendors around. So if you look on the slide right now, we have broken it down, I would say, into like different, how do you say, services. So you have identity and access management systems such as, you know, Okta, Ping, Centrify, Shibboleth, Micro Focus, and the list is long. You also have password management, content management system, CMS, code management system, computer login, and the list goes on. So right now, what you see on the screen is about 10% of the integrations that we have done. Literally, we have about 750 integrations which have been done with different technology vendors across the world, but also with technology vendors which are more European. Actually, it's one of the things that we're pushing quite a lot now, is working with the editors of software in the European area to actually have more integration. So this is actually quite interesting, because due to that, all those protocols that we support and all those integrations that we have already, this can enable you as a customer to actually become more compliant. For instance, these days in Europe, we're talking a lot about GDPR, we're talking a lot about PSD2. One of the key points of GDPR is actually ensuring that people who have access to sensitive data, they have to be authenticated properly. And one of the ways of actually making sure that the person who is actually having access to your data is the right person is basically by using a YubiKey, right? Okay. So we talked a little bit about that, and since I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of authentication now, we tried to put together a timeline of how we saw authentication evolving over the years. Obviously, this is something that we did as Yubico, and we tend to focus a little bit on how we see the security landscape. But basically, if you look at it, in the 1960s, to get access to, I would say, like privileged resources, you would just use a username and password. Then in the 1990s, we started to see a lot of like second factor happening. So second factors could be like a one-time password sent by an SMS, or a one-time password generator that you would have without taking the names, but most of you have already seen those kind of devices which look like a keyring, which will be generating like random numbers that you will use to log into your system. Then, as I said, around 2011, 2014, we developed FIDO-U2F, which is a very strong second factor authentication, which can be used at the same time with a lot of different services without any compromise in terms of security. But also it's very strong against phishing. I mean, literally, it's like almost impossible to phish. Well, I should not even say almost. Up to now, we have not seen any phishing attacks being successful against FIDO-U2F. And the biggest example of that is actually Google itself, with about 80,000 employees across the world. Since we adopted the YubiKey in like 2013 or something, they have had literally 0 account takeovers, right? And then in 2018, then came the revolution with FIDO2. So I talked a little bit about FIDO2, but FIDO2 is actually a system which is extremely flexible. So you can use FIDO2 as your second factor. So for instance, if you look at the top right, when I'm talking about FIDO2, you still have your username and password and then use the key. Or you can use FIDO2 just as the single factor. So basically, I just take the key and I can log into my system. Or I have what is actually like, I would say, making the buzz really in the market right now is like, you have that one YubiKey, which is actually a multi-factor authentication scheme by itself. So for instance, and I will show it to you in a little bit when we get to the demo part, to access to like to my Hotmail account, I can just put my YubiKey, which will do actually one part of, you know, like different authentication factors. So something that I possess. And then I will have to put a PIN code in. And that PIN code is the other factor, which is something that I know. So remember, when we're talking about authentication factors, there's 3 different kinds of things. So we have something that we own, something that we know, and something that we are. So something that we are could be biometrics, retina scan, thumbprints, you know, facial recognition, and that kind of stuff, right? So FIDO gives you that ability to actually be able to do all that with one device itself. And this is where we see the future of authentication going forward. Right, so I'm going to go very briefly about the different, I would say, advantages of using a protocol such as FIDO2. First of all, it's hardware backed with very strong cryptography. It's based on asymmetric cryptography, so literally there's no shared secrets. Second thing, every time we generate a new pair of credentials or keys on FIDO2, those keys are bound to the origin. So they are literally bounded to the services to which those can be used. So for instance, it could be Google, it could be Microsoft. Another thing that we added as well is a test of user presence. So if you have been in the IT world or the IT security world for a while, you know that sometimes you can get malware on your machine, and infected malware can do what we call replay attacks. So they log all the strokes that you do, username and password, and then they try to do it again. And that's also something that we have actually added in the YubiKeys is a test of user presence. So when you are going to do an authentication using FIDO2, you will have to physically touch the key. It's based on a capacitive contact, which is electric. And literally, if there is no one who is actually touching the key, the authentication will fail. Another thing that we did is the FIDO2 specifications is hosted by two alliances. One part is the FIDO Alliance, but the second part is the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C. Why it is important to note that is that the W3C is the organization or the alliance which actually, I would say, directs how web browsers across the world actually implement support for different protocols. And being hosted by the W3C, FIDO2 has actually been adopted by most of the, well, I would say all of the major web browsers out there. So we already have support on Microsoft Edge, we have support on Mozilla Firefox, we have support on Google Chrome, we have support on Opera. But more interesting is actually something which happens very rarely. We also are supported by Apple Safari, which is really amazing. So literally right now, it is a kind of authentication protocol that you can use anywhere with any kind of system that you use. We're talking also about secure backup because FIDO2 gives you the ability to actually have two different keys attached to your same user account. So this is very interesting in the sense that, you know, if ever you lose a password or something, how do I recover? The other thing which is interesting is the way that the protocol has been designed is that there is no shared secrets between two different services. So for instance, I could have my YubiKey, which is attached to my work Gmail account, but I could have the same YubiKey, which is attached to my personal Facebook account. And the key pairs which have been generated for both services are completely different. So there is no such thing as someone being able to go into Facebook and then getting my public key and trying to figure out who I am on another system. It's impossible to do. All right. So now I will be talking a little bit about the future of authentication and what last week actually Microsoft released as a public preview. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is that nowadays, if you have an Azure Active Directory Net and you have your machines connected to this Active Directory Internet, you can literally get rid of passwords completely. So how you will log in, and I will demonstrate that in a few minutes actually right now, is basically that you would take a YubiKey, go to your Windows session, just plug it in, put a PIN code, and log in. Now, at this point, it's always like, yeah, but I have to use a PIN code. How is this different from a password? And we have to make the difference clear right away. PIN codes are very different from passwords. Keep in mind that a password is a shared secret. So the same password that you use, that you will enter, that will be used to identify you, it's also the same data that is shared and kept on the server side, right? So how it usually works is that the password is encrypted or hashed, sent to the server, and the server checks if it is equal to the same thing which is available on the other side. A PIN code is different. A PIN code never leaves your device. So a PIN code will be attached to your YubiKey, and it will be never sent across the network or actually to any of the services. So that's how it's quite different. So right now, I'm going to show you a little bit about how it works. So you just give me a couple of seconds while I modify my sharing. And I can show you, so first of all, how we will log into a Windows session, and then I will show you how we can log into like a regular Hotmail account. All right. Yes. Okay, so now you should be seeing my machine, which is connected to Azure Active Directory. And it's literally at the way where I need to log in into my system now. So I will just connect my YubiKey to the virtual machine. There we go. And once it is done, now you see it has automatically detected that I have put a YubiKey in. It will ask me for a PIN code. Keep in mind that I did not have to put any username or password right now. I just put my YubiKey in, put my PIN code, press enter. Remember I talked about the test of user presence? So I'm touching my YubiKey and it has already detected me. So now a challenge response cryptographically done between the server and my YubiKey, and this will enable me to open my session. So it takes a little bit of time because unfortunately I'm running it on a virtual machine, so it can be, oh, there we go. So now we have logged in into our system. I actually have a full desktop open, which I can use with single sign-on to actually go, on all the applications that have behind or in the background. And this is quite interesting, but I actually did not have to put a username or a password in. Now, just try to imagine how much easier that actually makes life for an end user. Just have a key, put a PIN code. The PIN code doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be, something that you change very frequently because it literally is never shared across the network. It's actually local to your key. Right. The next part of the demo, again, please give me a few seconds while my screen changes.
It might be worth mentioning that, an office worker, one thing, but think of an automation, an industrial worker, where he wears security clothes, maybe big gloves, taking them off, doing the username, password, all that. People actually sharing accounts to get around or actually make ways to get around problems like that. With now, it's just the YubiKey and you're in. So a lot of interest in sort of different applications. Yes.
All right. So the next one that I'm going to show you is, now I showed you how actually you can use it to log into a Windows session. The next thing is, well, what if I need to access applications from a web page? And that's what I'm going to show you now. So let's say I want to go to outlook.com, which is, just personal email. I get in, and you will see that I actually have the option to sign in with a security key. So I just click on sign in with a security key. First thing, again, is take action on your security key. So I touch it. It asks me for the second factor, which is the PIN. I put in my PIN code, click on X, again, a test of presence, and that's it. No more username, no more password, no more getting SMSs, no more getting whatever else, just a YubiKey plus a PIN code, and you're inside. And that's how simple it is. And it is extremely secure because it is based on public key cryptography once more. So there is literally no way of phishing that or actually doing man-in-the-middle attacks when it comes to this. Right. So that was about the demos today. One more second while I change my screen. All right, so we've taken you to how it's used in real life. It does seem very simple. It does seem very easy, and that's why it has been designed to be that way. But at the same time, the mathematics and the cryptography happening behind it literally makes it like one of the most secure ways to actually secure your authentication flow. That being said, I already showed you how you can do your passwordless logging with Microsoft, right? And we can just go through a couple of potential use cases. So one of the use cases that we come across very often is actually within the retail industry, where we don't want people to be having to input their username and password all the time, but at the same time, we don't want people to be having access to a machine which is really not secured at all, because you might be having very, I would say, sensitive information, against when we're talking about PSD2 and GDPR, about customer information, about details of HR and everything. FIDO2 is a great use case in there, because it enables you to have the simplicity of authentication and also the security of it. Same thing happens in healthcare. We have all heard about the doctors who have to go and use like machines in different, I would say, rooms inside a hospital. And sometimes they don't actually want to have something like entering a username or password, simply because they have gloves which have been sterilized on them, and they should not be touching a machine. Now, with an NFC on a YubiKey, well, you can just tap and go and get access to all the information that you have. Obviously, when we come to the financial sector, I mean, this is not something that we need to go very much in detail in. Everyone knows how important the information is there, and how important it is to actually keep that information safe from prying eyes. This is also some of the use cases that we have seen. Lars mentioned it about the manufacturing area, where we have people usually who have to access a machine or have to access a station, who might be having like heavy gloves or something, and they don't necessarily need to have to put in a username and password. FIDO2 is also a great fit for this needs. Right. Transportation. In the world where we are talking a lot more about autonomous vehicles, authentication is becoming very important. We need to be able to certify or identify or authentify those people who are having access to like all those different types of applications. Or something as simple as like, you know, passing a metro station and having to recharge money on your account. How do I make it simple for my users? And this is something that we can also do with FIDO2. And obviously, we talked about consumer applications. So things like Gmail, things like Facebook, things like Instagram, things like GitHub, or Dropbox for that matter, those are all people who have already embarked on the FIDO adventure with us. They are already supporting FIDO U2F, and now they will be moving towards FIDO2. It will take some time, obviously, but this is on all their roadmaps right now. All right, so I think that was it from my side in terms of the presentation. I hope this gave you like a good idea about what we can do with the YubiKey, what we have been able to do with many customers already, and what we will be doing in the future as well when it comes to the future of authentication with FIDO2. So, Lars, if you want to take the last steps.
So, what should you do now? I mean, if you're interested and you got what Ashwin told you about the future of authentication, I mean, we have it already here. It's ready for you to try. And what we suggest is that you order a couple of keys through Hermitage, and you can start helping, you could start testing it. There is a developer program, so if you are with tons of information to help you to integrate, and you could also be part of our ecosystem, and we can do co-promotion if you're building huge applications that you sell natively in your countries or across the globe. Doesn't really matter. We can do stuff together. So it's all there, yubico.com.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's about it.
That's it. So thank you very much once more. So